I started writing in 2015. And when I started, I was terrible. But I've gotten a lot better. And I want to talk about that today. My name is Seth. I'm a full-time fantasy author. I've written 26 books. And I make these videos because there are a lot of authors out there who aren't making it, and I don't want you to be one of them. One of the hardest things to do in life is understand your own growth. Because we live in our own perspective, it becomes almost impossible for us to see where and when we've grown. Unless we take time to reflect on the distance we've come and the changes in our life, we're oblivious to what's actually happening. But when we do take that time, when we have a sense of self-reflection, and we spend a few moments thinking about our past, our present, and our future, it's often really surprising how much we've developed. Now, it can also be really depressing if you haven't developed. And as someone who spent many years in a state where not only had I not developed, but I had even gone backwards, I understand how crushing that can be. But I do want to recognize that we are always moving forward, simply because we accumulate experiences with time. The other day, I was reflecting a little bit on how far I've come as a writer. And so I want to talk about 3 things that I have improved in that I'm really happy about. And I want to share with you 2 things that I'm hoping to continue improving in. I'm a huge advocate for self-reflection, for spending time understanding who you are, and especially understanding who you are in reference to who you used to be. When I started writing, I wouldn't know a plot if it kicked me in the face. I had no concept of plot. I mean, I knew how to string scenarios together. I knew how to tell the reader that our hero has gone from point A to point B, and maybe even fought the villain along the way, but I didn't have any sense of what plot was. I didn't have any sense of what sort of conflicts drive story. I didn't have any sort of sense that you even needed a conflict at all. Over time, however, I have developed a better understanding of plot. I now realize that my characters need something to do. We can't just watch them completing actions. There has to be something behind it, a conflict that's driving them towards decisions. There has to be something that can be resolved in the story. Because that's what plot is at its core. It's something that needs to be resolved, whether a problem or a mindset, whether it's an external scenario or an internal scenario, whether it needs to be fixed or whether it needs to be broken. Something has to change from beginning to end. And that thing is our plot. Along with that, I've also learned how to use tropes. When I started writing, I had a good sense of what a trope was, in that as a reader, I could identify them. What I didn't know is how to use them as an author, as a story hook, to grab our reader and draw them in, or to propel the plot along by giving the reader shorthand to a vast array of knowledge that it would take forever to spell out explicitly. And so over the last few years, as I've written more and more books, I've started to understand how to take plot and insert tropes into it to improve the reading experience. I've done it well and I've done it poorly. And through the repetition of it, I've begun to learn how to apply tropes to my stories. And last but not least, I've also come to a better understanding of prose. My prose now is much tighter than it was before. I'm a huge fan of the idea that we should be getting better with every book we write. And while I don't think my prose is in its final form, it's still evolving, I do think that it is way better than it used to be. All you have to do is open up my first book, Nova Terra Titan, and open up my latest book and compare them side by side. It doesn't meander quite as much. I have less useless filler in it. But just because I've improved doesn't mean I'm where I want to be. There's still a couple of things that I'm working on. And if I'm being honest, I'm still working on my understanding of plot, my application of tropes, and tightening my prose. But there are 2 things specifically for the end of this year and next year that I'm going to work on. I feel like my characters are probably one of my major weaknesses. And this is really, and hear me out on this. A lot of people read my books and they say, man, I really like your characters. But what I've realized is that almost always the things they like about my characters are things that I've done unconsciously, things that I didn't necessarily think about or plan. And I would like to have a more intentional understanding of how to put those pieces together. Because while I have characters in my stories, usually the main character, who ends up being interesting and nuanced, a lot of my side characters, at least to me, feel a little bit flat still. And so I want to understand how to build them better. And then the second thing that I'm trying to work on is tension. I find that a lot of my stories tend to meander. They don't have a real high stakes feeling. I do sometimes write slice of life, but really the tension that I'm looking for is tension between characters, tension between protagonist and antagonist, tension between characters and the world around them. It might be because I'm uncomfortable with stories that have tension for a long time, and so I tend to, in my own stories, resolve things very, very quickly. But I'm realizing that while that's okay for a specific type of story, there are other kinds of stories, some of which I'm trying to write, that need more tension. And so these are the two things in my own craft that I'm trying to improve. I'm trying to improve my characters, and I'm trying to improve my tension. If you stick around this channel, I'll probably be talking to you more about this. I'm actually reading some books on character now, and they're pretty good, so I'll probably talk about them on this channel in a future video. In your writing journey, what are the strides that you have made? Let me know in the comments something that you're really proud to have developed well in. And as always, if you have any tips for writing characters or increasing tension, let me know.